Welcome back to the Abundant Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Pereira, and I am here with Dr. Annie Krajewski, and we are going to be talking about her life as a traveling psychologist, because I'm guessing some of y'all are wanting to travel elsewhere, maybe full time. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels like such an honor to be interviewed by you.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, kind of maybe let's do some origin story. I'd love to hear how you started traveling and working at the same time.
Sure. So I guess I started traveling internationally when I was in grad school, and it was like the first time I'd ever gone outside of the country, and I just really loved it. And it was like, yeah, it just like enlivened something inside of me. And then, when I was graduating or I was like finishing up my doctoral program, I learned about being a digital nomad and I was like, oh wow, like that seems really cool. But
Hmm.
there's no way I'm going to be able to do that because I want to be, in private practice. Like I want to see therapy patients. Um, but then I kind of was really, that never left me. Like the more I traveled, like especially I went to like Thailand and I was like, oh my God, I want to live here. There's
Hmm.
digital nomads here. But I still kind of didn't quite know how it would work having a private practice. But then I was able to kind of discover that there were people who were doing it. And when I had the first month I had opened up my private practice, my like long-term partner broke up with me and I
Oh,
was like, "Oh, it's just open to like in-person practice. Like I'm committed to this here in Virginia." I was in Arlington, Virginia at the time. But once that happened, it kind of really broke open my mind to think about possibilities. I was like, this is something I really want to do. Like let's try and go for it. And so I kind of knew Virginia wasn't home and I had this like desire to travel. So I moved from my apartment in Virginia back to Washington State where my family was with the idea that I would, hopefully travel and work, but I had no clue what it was going to be like. And so I had already had a trip to Morocco planned before I had decided to move. And so I went on this trip to Morocco and I had all my stuff to work because I had to work on the front and tail end of the trip. And I got to Morocco and I loved it so much. Like I was like, I don't want to leave. And I
hmm.
guess this is why I like uprooted my life from Virginia to Washington. Why not? Let's stay just for another month. Like let's extend the trip, which I did, which was I think in part like I think I was kind of scared to be a digital nomad and to travel, and so in some ways like already being in Morocco and thinking like, oh, okay, like this feels like an easy step. Like it's not like I have to go home and then come back. Like it was just
Right,
kind of this
right.
spontaneous thing that I didn't have to think too much about. But then I think like a day after I decided to stay, I ended up meeting my now partner. And so
Uh-huh.
that was just kind of like it. I was like, okay, well, we hit it off pretty quickly and I wanted to continue exploring that connection and I really was loving Morocco and it was so amazing. And so then the rest is kind of history. I had like gone back for like maybe 3 weeks to set my life up to be gone long term because I wasn't supposed to be gone,
Hmm.
forever. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started. It was like this finding out that it was even a thing, and then kind of deciding, yeah, that I wanted to do it and kind of jumped right in.
Amazing. How long ago was that?
That was last August or 2 Augusts ago. So August 2023. So it's been like probably a year and a half now.
And are you in Morocco now, or do you travel around a
Yes.
good bit? How do you balance your time?
Sure. So I'm primarily in Morocco, because that's where my partner and his family are. But we last year we went to Thailand and Bali. We did like 2 months in Thailand and like a month and a half in Bali, which was like incredible. And then we came back to Morocco and we've been here. I think I have decided to do a little bit longer stints because moving around a lot is just a little bit hard, especially like running a business.
Mhm.
But we're actually headed back to Thailand because I am pregnant and I don't want to give birth in Morocco for a variety of reasons. And so now we're going to Thailand because I have experience with their medical system there. And so we'll be in Thailand for like 6 months. So we're kind of like all over the place, but
Mhm.
Morocco is definitely like one of our bases.
Got it. I feel like your whole life is an adventure.
I know when we decided to go to Thailand for me to give birth, I was like, this is such a like this is like quintessential my story at this point. Like I just kind of it's kind of wild.
Is there birthright citizenship in Thailand?
No, in Thailand you have to be Thai by blood, and so
Got
one
it.
of the parents would have to be Thai. Yeah, but
Fun.
yeah. Darn it, I know. Thailand's so beautiful.
Yeah. So, okay. Who are you seeing in your practice? Is it people like what states are you licensed in? Are you seeing Americans exclusively? Are you like how's
Yes.
it working?
Yeah. So I had built up a caseload when I was in Virginia because I had had a caseload there for like a year and a half. And that's where I like did all my SEO, and that's kind of where my like website was placed because that's where I got licensed. And so I would say primarily that's where all my patients are, or like in the Virginia, DC area, because now I'm licensed in Virginia, DC, and then I'm also licensed in Washington.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, exclusively US based patients. There's a lot of legalities around being able to see people abroad
Mhm.
in terms of like therapy. Obviously, with coaching, there's a more kind of,
Yeah.
there's more possibilities. But yeah, so all of my patients are US based,
Got it.
which is
So you've
really
got
nice.
yeah, you've got three different time zones that you're working with. How do you manage those?
Yes. Yes. Well, I feel like one of the ways I manage it is trying to keep my schedule as consistent as possible. So I
Mhm.
try not to like move people around too much. So I have a sense in my mind what time it is here compared to Virginia. Um, and since most of my patients are in Virginia, I just like that's where my mind is anchored in terms of scheduling. So if I do ever get like a Washington-based patient, I kind of think in terms of or the East Coast, just
Mhm.
because yeah,
Minus three.
three
Uh-huh.
time zones are like a lot to manage.
Yeah.
So I definitely try to keep like, my caseload or yeah, my schedule consistent,
Mhm.
and try not to change it as much. And then like little tricks like keeping my computer to the East Coast time. So like right now it says 109. So
Mhm.
it's not like I'm not like confused or
Right.
whatever when I'm like with patients. But
And
so I
what
think
time
those are
is it
kind of
in
like
Morocco right now?
it's 7 7. Yeah, it's 7:10.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a 6 hour time difference. And
Hmm.
then when I go to Thailand, it'll be a 12-hour time difference.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So like when I see people in the morning, it'll be my nighttime.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so how, like, especially when you're traveling while working, like if you're going from here to Thailand to, like you're keeping them consistent, but does that mess with your sleep? Does it mess with like how you do life and
Yeah.
enjoy where you are?
That's a really good question because that's like probably the biggest factor when it comes to traveling and seeing people based in the United States. So when I first did it, I tried to keep everything as consistent as possible, especially since I had just like moved from Washington or from Virginia to Washington. I was like, that was already disruptive enough. I didn't want to then be like, oh, I have to completely change my schedule because I'm in Morocco. So I was working. I was seeing like I usually saw people in like the evening-ish time in DC, and so that translated to seeing people like 4 or 5 p.m. Oh wait, no, like 9 or 10 p.m. to like 1 or 2 a.m. Morocco time. So I was definitely working at nighttime and
Uh-huh.
into the middle of the night. And I found at first, like I actually really liked that because when you're in the States and you're having the like kind of more regular schedule, there's so much more limitations in what you can do on the
Mm.
days that like I was working. But I found like I was working in the evening, I could just sleep in and then I could go to the beach or like, go do whatever I wanted. And then I would spend like the rest of or, I would obviously see people at nighttime. So I actually really liked it.
Mhm.
But then when I got pregnant, I was like, okay, this is not working.
Hmm.
And so I had to change my schedule. And so this time zone's a little bit easier, just because it's like a 5 to 6 hour time difference, depending on when, like what time it is in the States, given the, daylight savings time. But um, yeah, so I was working the night, but now I work from like 11, wait, no, like 2 p.m. to like 4 or 5 p.m., depending on the day, which is like really nice. So I still get the morning and the evening. So it's like
Hmm.
you can kind of work it to where it's really nice. And then when I was in Thailand the first time, I kept the schedule as consistent as possible again. And so I was waking up at like 2:40 a.m. to see
Uh-huh.
people at 3 a.m., which
Wow.
was really intense. That
Hmm.
was, I think, probably the hardest, because I think waking up was like, going to sleeping, like, okay, I need to make sure I wake up and not like sleep through my alarm, was a lot
Hmm.
more like mentally taxing. But so that's why we kind of didn't do it for too long. But now when we go back, since I switched my patients to the morning, I'll be working the evenings there, which will be like much easier. And so there's definitely ways around it. It's just kind of
Hmm.
trying to figure out like what works best for you. Because some people, like I said, like I liked being able to have all the free time, and I
Hmm.
didn't mind kind of seeing people, but then obviously with things changing. So it all depends, but it's pretty manageable if you're open to it. Like some people I think probably would have a hard time,
Hmm.
but it's also kind of there's pros and cons.
Right, right. Yeah. And it sounds like for you, like it just makes sense to just make
Yes.
it work because this is the life you want to live.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
such a good example of like you can have what you want, which I'm constantly telling people. Like you're not just having what you want, like in the real basic way of seeing the clients you want and making the money you want, but like you're like really having what you want in a way that I'm
Yeah.
hoping is really inspirational for people.
Yeah, I hope it is, because I feel like you have to like, finagle it and figure it out, but you can definitely, like, you can have both worlds of having, like, I love seeing my patients, but I also, like, I'm glad that I don't have to sacrifice this dream of living internationally and, being in other, places in the world. So it's
Yeah,
definitely possible.
absolutely. And I think about how, depending on where you are, I mean, like Thailand is a lot less expensive than Virginia and
Yes.
Washington. And
Yes,
so you don't have to work as
significantly.
much.
Yes, yeah.
Especially if you're seeing American clients, so you're charging American prices, and it just goes much farther.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is very true. Like I've never spent more than $1,000 on a place, and the most was like 950. But we were like literally on the beach with like this like
Wow.
beautiful beach view. Now it's like for like a two-bedroom, we're paying $500, and it's like a 15-minute walk to the beach. Like, it's
Wow.
way less expensive than in the, like I'm like I would never be able to live like this in the States, like so close to the beach. It just would, I'd have to see like 60 patients a week to be
Right.
able to afford that in
Yeah.
the States.
And like, what are the rules for how long you can stay in certain places? Do you have to like leave countries? Is it different for countries? How do you keep up with that?
Yeah, so yeah, it's every country is different, and it's kind of dependent on what passport you have. But with an American passport, you kind of get into anywhere for a certain amount of time. So most, like here in Morocco, I get like a 90-day tourist visa, like just pretty standard.
Mhm.
To get a longer term visa is quite hard, and I don't even know if they have longer term visa, but you can apply for residency, but it's very difficult to get residency. And so what most people do here is they do visa runs where they leave like once their 90 days is up, or right before, they'll like go to another country and then come back, and it like automatically renews. That's
Okay.
because that's kind of how Morocco works.
Mhm.
But places like Europe, like I think you can stay up to 3 months, but then you have to leave for 3 months, and then you
Mm.
can go back. But so there's like much more restrictions there unless you apply for longer term visas, which I think some of the countries have. Like there are some digital nomad visas, like I think Croatia and Spain and maybe Portugal are ones that have pretty accessible visas. Well, they also have that like in Thailand. They're a little bit stricter than Morocco. So it's like once I enter, I get 60 days and I can extend it for 30, or I can, and then leave and then come back for another, 60 plus 30 days. So there's like ways around it because once you start getting into the longer term visas, they can be quite expensive. Like
Mhm.
in Thailand, they do have a digital nomad visa now, but you have to pay like $500 and you have to show that you have like $15,000 in a bank account.
Mhm.
And then if you want an even longer term, like it's like $20,000 for like a 5 year period. So there's
Got
like
it.
they can get pricey, but
Mhm.
you kind of have to just look at each country. And I think you can apply for residency in some of the countries, but some of them can be hard and some of them aren't. Like it's so interesting, like being from the States and immigration and all that, but like every country has their own view of immigration or tourism or things
Mhm.
like that. And so yeah, but it is, I haven't had any issues with it. Like I can't stay long term. Like I can't just like stay in Morocco without having to leave the country, which can be just a little bit tricky. Um, but there's definitely like ways around it.
Mhm. But it sounds like you can leave for what, like a 24 hours and come back, or does it need to be a little?
Yeah, and some people just like cross the border to Spain up in the north of Morocco because it's like right there, and then come back the same day.
Oh,
And in a lot of countries, if you do something like that, you might be cutting it close because some like border agents might be a little bit stricter than others. But yeah, like most people I think leave for a day and come back and it's like there's no questions asked. Like I have so many Moroccan stamps on my passport at this point. Like every time I'm like, oh no, I hope they're not gonna be like, you're always here.
yeah.
But like they're really, I think Morocco, like a lot of countries like want tourists to come, and so they can be kind of more lenient, but it kind of depends. If you get a grumpy, border agent.
Yeah. This is so interesting because I think about like, I have a number of friends who have either left the country for good, or
Hmm.
like, Portugal's real hot right now to escape the
Yes,
United
very
States.
hot.
And friends who were looking into Canada, but it's like next to impossible to immigrate to Canada. But like they're not considering the digital nomad option and like exploring what
Yes.
that would look like. They're all looking at residency, which is now I'm going to talk to them.
Yeah.
Like there's another option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess if I know people who like get apartments and rent apartments in like Thailand and stuff like that without a long-term residency. So it's like it's definitely possible if you want like a
Mhm.
main place to stay. And it is like a more flexible option. Like if you want to like fully immigrate to a place, that might, then you might want to consider residency. But
Right.
yeah, there's definitely options for sure.
Right. But if you want to
Besides
ride
just
out
because
4 years, you can like you don't
yeah.
necessarily, you just need to go back and forth a little more
Yes,
simply.
exactly.
Like eat, pray, love
Yes.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is it like for you with countries that speak different languages? Like are you great at picking up languages? Or are you like most
No,
places speak English?
absolutely
So
not. I am like so bad with languages. And I just seem to pick like countries that have extremely hard languages. Like in Morocco, they speak Darija, which is like a dialect of Arabic. And
Mhm.
Arabic is like a tonal language. And so it's like, I tried learning it and it's so hard because you have to make certain like noises with your throat that I'm like, I have no clue how they're even doing it. But
Uh-huh.
so, anyways, like it's very hard to learn. But luckily, since my partner's, is Moroccan, and so he speaks fluent Darija. So I kind of get like around it with that, but then I learned just kind of basic communication. So I can get by even when I'm not with him. Um, and then in Thailand, there are a lot of people who are just around tourists
Mhm.
that can know basic communication. But honestly, technology has made it so possible because you can
Mhm.
just pull up your translator app and anytime I've had any issues, I'll just pull that up and I'm able to kind of get by.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you're wanting to live in a place longer, like it can get a little bit isolating if you're not in a touristy area because it's maybe
Mhm.
hard to make friends with people who don't speak your language.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the practicalities, like I think a lot of people know you're a tourist and are quite friendly and like want to help you, and a lot of them
Hmm.
might kind of have the basic way of communicating. But it is, I think the thing that has surprised me the most is I think how much I can tell what people are saying, or like how much you communicate through your body, and how much is just so ingrained. Like when you go to the store, like, you know what to do. Like you don't need to speak the language.
Right.
Like a lot of times they'll just show me the number. Like they won't even
Uh-huh.
try saying it. So I think it like people can communicate in so many more ways than direct speech.
Hmm.
Which is like when my partner and his friends are talking and I'm there and they're all talking to Risha, like I know, like sometimes I can really know what they're saying from like context clues, things like
Hmm.
that, which is like so, like I feel like I'm like really developing a part of my brain that I would have
Yeah.
never had to do, like develop before. But it's definitely not something I would, have anyone worry about, especially if they have a smartphone, which at this point, who doesn't have a smartphone?
Right. Right. Yeah. And so it sounds like you were like the easiest way to do this as a therapist is to continue in the states that I'm licensed in, like follow those rules because I know them.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
therapists can be wherever when as long as you're licensed in that state. So
Yes.
what are some things you learned about the process of being a digital nomad that you didn't like that you were like, oh, that wouldn't have occurred to me?
Well, I think there are a lot of practicalities, like even like a bank account, like you have to have like my bank account, like if I want to use Zelle, I have to make sure I have the right like I was first trying to use Zelle with Capital One, but Capital One is like you need a US based number, and I don't have a US based number at this point.
Mhm.
And so I switched my Zelle to another like bank account. So there's like little things like that where when you're not in the States, there's so much that you don't easily have access to. And so there's like
Mhm.
just like little nuances you have to get around. Or things like with like business wise, like there are certain platforms that don't allow you to be outside of the country, and so you have to you have to make sure you have the right EHR.
Mhm.
um, I think the thing that surprised me the most is that how doable it is, and the things that I was really worried about. Like I was so terrified that I would go to another country and the internet would be terrible. I was like,
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to be able to see patients. Like I need to have really stable internet. But I think my experience of internet, traveling to hotels, when I would travel internationally is in hotels, and hotels are going to have like the worst internet,
Right.
possible. Like, they're not going
Right.
to pay to have high speed internet. Well, for all of their guests, I guess. But so I think like there are things that I was so terrified about that just like didn't, like it was just so much easier than I could have ever imagined. Like obviously there's things like homesickness and the longer you're away, like and life changes like being pregnant. Like I got really homesick like during the first trimester, like things like that. But just knowing that that's a part of the process is
Mhm.
helpful. That, you know, digital nomad, like you're like I think a lot of people have this fantasy about being a digital nomad, like, oh, like my life sucks, I'm gonna go like move to this beautiful country and everything's gonna be great. And it is like it's so magical, but at the same time like life follows you.
Right.
So
Right. Problems don't just
um
dissolve.
yes,
But
exactly.
yeah. But I can
But
see how like the new environment would probably shake. I mean, in the same way when we travel internationally just for travel, like it kind of
mhm,
shakes loose some things that you're like, okay, maybe this thing I'm worried about isn't quite as important as I've been acting like it
yes,
is. Um,
yeah,
yeah. And I
yeah.
don't know. I have this fantasy that most other countries like have their shit together a bit more than the United States people do, just in terms of like
Mhm.
our obsession with work, our obsession with being on
Yeah.
our phones all the time, like those kinds of things.
Or
I
consumerism, it's
consumerism.
shocking.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I feel like there's so much deconstruction I've done of my like American like things that I've just learned in America. Like it's really crazy once you leave just how like insane it is. How much you really do buy or work or obsessed with certain things there. It's been quite a fascinating process.
Yeah. I mean, like, not to get too woo, but I just feel like you're probably able to get more to the core of yourself through that deconstruction and like what actually
Yeah.
matters.
And what matters? Yeah. And what actually, I think being like, for example, like being pregnant, consumerism is a huge part of being pregnant. Like
Oh
they're
yeah.
like, you need this, 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 this. And not being in a place where that is a thing at all. Like there's no shipping, there's no Amazon here. Like they don't even have addresses. Like you can get
Uh-huh.
things shipped, but like, it's just not the same. Like they don't have a Target where you can go buy a bunch of baby stuff. And so in some ways, like not being able to like just consume has made me be like, okay, well, I think I want to buy these things because I'm quite anxious about becoming a mom. And so maybe let's look at that
Mhm.
instead of like buying a bunch of stuff on Amazon that I think will save me from the like unknown of motherhood. And I think that is
Mhm.
just true for a lot of other, parts of the process as well of being human is things can be, nerve-wracking and there's things in the States that, it's like, oh, like marketing is such a big deal. They're like, oh, here, buy this. But, and I think that's just like one thing that I think, yeah, is being away from all of that. And like even being in nature and being so much more connected, like being in a culture where community is a huge part. Like they are always relying on each other. And it is just so fascinating of like in the States, like we have technology, so it's like you don't even have to like talk to someone and food shows up at your door. It's just like
Yeah.
not normal to like most of the world. So just like I think, yeah, there is so much, but then you kind of have to, you have this community, but then you kind of have to face certain parts of yourself in the community. I think there is just so much you can learn about yourself when you're outside of this kind of curated, very controlled American experience. Like you have so much control in the States.
Yeah.
And like you think that that is something that's like, I need control. And I've really had to let that go. Like even the fact that I don't know when the bus is going to show up and I need to take the bus.
Uh-huh.
In the States, you have like a little tracker that shows where the bus is. So
Exactly.
it's like I do
Yeah.
think I have to see myself so much more and sit with myself without
Hmm.
that like sense which is yeah it's just it's really interesting, and I'm sure anyone who immigrates to another country has a similar process of
Right.
there's such norms from where they are that going into another place is just really shakes up themselves and
Hmm.
how they see themselves.
I love that. We all need a little bit more shaking up, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really great. I it can be hard, but it's like I really love the process. Like it's something that's hard to really quite put words to, but is really I think helps my well-being so much. Just being in this like learning about myself in such a deep way.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you're doing a training for everybody in the Abundance Party. I'm
Yes,
so
yeah.
excited about. So people listening, if
Yes.
you're not already in there and you're really strongly considering being a digital nomad or just want to learn more about it and hop in the party and join for
Yes.
this live webinar, because I have like 50 more questions I want to ask you, but
Yeah.
we're out of time. So I'll save them for then.
Yes, I'm really excited.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Annie, and we will talk to you soon.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you.